Guys, live in the Hawkszone Rundown, Pulse of the Hawks, Mookie Alexander in the house again tonight, our bi-weekly segment. New OC, if you caught us last night, we jumped in on it, emergency podcast. But this time around, we got Mookie to break it all down. So it's going to be some great insight. And we're going to get into a lot more on the other side. But guys, before that, if you're watching the channel, you've been watching, go down, hit the sub button for us. Hit the sub button. Share the video, like the video. It all helps out the channel, and it helps us, continue bring this awesome content that we love bringing for you guys. And get your super chats in, get the comments flooding. We're going to get into it. All that on the other side.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about me.
Yeah, let's go. It's go time, baby.
Here comes Gino. Steps up, takes that shot to the end zone. It is Metcalf.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You about to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Off me.
Nobody in the world can do it.
Are you kidding me? Trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Jackson Smith is jigged on. The circus music rolls in. Throws it forward. Oh my goodness, he caught it.
This is the Hawkszone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
Guys, welcome back to the Hawkszone Rundown, bi-weekly segment, Pulse of the Hawks with Mookie Alexander back again with us. Mookie, what's going on? We got the OC hired. That's out of the way. How you feeling, man, about the hire?
I'm feeling relieved because it was kind of just a barren spell of no news for several days other than Hank Fraley not taking the job. So we had talked about Kubiak a couple of segments ago. So it's not surprising that they went with him. But it's just cautious optimism, the same way I was cautiously optimistic about Ryan Grubb. It's just that the skepticism is totally different. Any skepticism I have of Kubiak is completely different from the obviously very warranted skepticism we had of Ryan Grubb. So at least they hired somebody with NFL play calling experience, which is to me one of the more important parts of this hiring process.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mookie, because we heard when Mike McDonald had his season-end presser, so potentially this is going to be a situation where we're not looking just to have someone that has NFL play calling experience. We're going to really look and kind of go through the whole process of who can we bring in, young, exciting, maybe someone that's a more of a veteran guy. And I think they kind of got best of both worlds here in Kubiak. You got a younger play caller, he's only 37, but you also got a guy that's been in the league for 11 years and really been in it longer since his dad was in it since, basically the late 80s, early 90s. You have a guy that's going to have connections. And the thing for me, when I was looking at all of the candidates, especially the ones that got second interviews, the one thing for me was with Klint Kubiak, I think he has the best chance to build the best staff around himself just due to his connections and due to the fact he's an NFL family kind of guy, right? Like you've got a guy that's had his family be part of the NFL for decades. So it'll be very interesting to see. And I think honestly his system might fit a lot of Seattle's pieces as they currently are constructed. So it'll be interesting to see how this marriage kind of works out. But I think more than last year, this was more of a Mike McDonald hire than maybe last year's was.
Yeah, and we should make it clear to everybody watching or listening to this that just because Kubiak was hired doesn't mean that's the end of the coaching staff search, because Scott Huff is not a lock to stay on this team. And I suspect, and this is 95% guess and 5% a little bit of feeling behind the scenes, that I believe that Ryan Grubb is going to get a college job eventually. I mean, we're seeing movement already. I mean, Jim Knowles just went from Ohio State to Penn State. So you're going to get more college football movements in the coaching ranks over the next few weeks. But if/when Grubb gets a new job, I think that Huff is still going to be a package deal. And there's a difference between firing Huff and Huff leaving on his own accord to go back to the college team. So as far as Kubiak's concerned, yeah, there could be a different passing game coordinator, for example. Will we see a run game coordinator? The passing game coordinator stuff is important because Jake Peetz has had his name kind of floated around a bit as a potential offensive coordinator. He's been loosely linked to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers job. Even the Las Vegas Raiders Pete's was considered a potential candidate, but nothing concrete as far as an interview. So, yeah, I assume there are going to be more adjustments to this coaching staff to more appropriately fit the needs of Kubiak, as opposed to just having to hastily put together a staff because you were one of the last teams to actually hire somebody.
Were you surprised? Like, Pete's name was floating around kind of early in the discussions, even before the Grubb was let go. Like, it just makes sense, even though he doesn't have that the play calling experience. He's from the McVay tree. He's been in the NFL for a long time. Do you think it was a case of Ryan Grubb failed quite badly in being Mike Macdonald's first year as a head coach, thinking, I don't really want to go there again. I want, like Bryce mentioned, a bit of best of both worlds. He has some OC experience. He has the network. And then you kind of look at what he's done with a couple of past quarterbacks, like the passing game coordinator in San Francisco, what he did there. They get to the NFC Championship with Brock Purdy, Pro Bowl. And then in Minnesota, Kirk Cousins with, you look at the numbers, I think it was 33 TDs to 7 interceptions. Like, those are the kind of numbers, like, if depending who the quarterback is, if Geno's back, you get to maybe not that good, but that ratio is a lot better. Like, you kind of have more confidence in this guy, whether he's working with the quarterbacks or aligning with what Mike Macdonald wants to do as a whole, as a team, what this image wants to be. But do you think it was more of a case like that? Like, it was a good fit, but also Mike's like, I'm not going to swing for the fences of low floor and high ceiling, where Kubiak's more of that higher floor. Do you think it played a bit more of a role, say, what happened this past season with Grubb?
I think it did, because it was already risky and kind of unprecedented to hire an offensive coordinator with zero prior NFL anything experience. Like, it's one thing if it's somebody who's never been an NFL offensive coordinator before, but it's somebody like Grant Udinski, who is currently an assistant passing coordinator, assistant quarterbacks coach in Minnesota. So it's like, you've been in the NFL system. You know how the NFL works. You've been there several years. But Grubb, great in college, and I'm not going to take anything away from his success in college, 0 days in the NFL, even just loosely. Like, even Sarkisian had a year in the NFL, I think, with the Raiders, like way back in 2004. So he's got some level of experience that he had there. But I don't think Macdonald was maybe necessarily, and maybe Schneider too, willing to totally risk having somebody, again, who is a play calling neophyte, have somebody who is kind of maybe mixing the old school with the new school, with Kubiak's offense, and also more closely aligning with what Macdonald wants out of his offense. And for defensive coaches, defensive-minded coaches, as we said in the last Pulse of the Hawks, nailing that defensive coordinator hire is so important, because if they're really, really good, they end up being a head coach. Look what happened with Liam Cohen and Dave Canales. Back-to-back offensive coordinator hirings for Todd Bowles, nailed them both. Unfortunately for Baker Mayfield, he gets to lose his OC yet again. Dan Quinn in Washington hired Kingsbury, and Kingsbury, I don't know if he'll be a head coach again this offseason, but at the very least, he's done very well with the Commanders. And previously, Quinn hired Kyle Shanahan, and Shanahan ended up producing an MVP season out of Matt Ryan. So nailing that OC search is important, even if just for one season. So I think that for Macdonald, having Kubiak is kind of that, I won't call it the safe pick, but it was probably the most pragmatic approach to the offensive coordinator search. The other names, the great unknowns like Udinski, even though he's a high riser, I feel like it would have been riskier, especially given the assumption that Seattle is going to still keep trying to compete. So yeah, Kubiak, again, don't know if he's going to be great. We'll probably have to figure that out by September. We don't even know if Geno's going to be his quarterback or if DK is still going to be one of his top two receivers. There's still a lot to figure out. But if we assume very little else changes, I'm a little more comfortable with the idea of having Kubiak and somebody from the Shanahan system running the offense now, as opposed to just trying to implement a college offense and kind of doing it in a ham-fisted way.
Yeah, it'll be interesting as well, because we talk about, you mentioned Geno, you mentioned DK. He's kind of got a history of working with quarterbacks of Geno's skill set, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, and getting the most out of them in a way without putting them at risk at high interceptions. And that's one thing I'm really interested with Kubiak. To me, when I looked at all the candidates, he had the highest floor, but maybe not the highest ceiling. You could have hired Grant Udisky and he could have lit up the NFL potentially, right? Like be the whiz kid that everyone was kind of anointing him already. Or you could have got a guy that was as bad as Grubb, that couldn't command the room, that couldn't, do the type of things you need to do as an offensive coordinator and lead that entire unit. Hank Fraley on the same kind of token, like with Hank Fraley, yes, you were getting a guy that had some NFL experience, but he never called plays. He just now has gotten promoted to being run game coordinator with the Detroit Lions. So when you look at it in a whole, is okay, if you'd brought in and done the tag team thing again with like Bevel and Cable, that didn't necessarily wasn't going to, bode great results because you have a guy that maybe is not comfortable calling plays. And how are we handling that? Is it like okay, now we'll call a pass and okay, now we'll call a run again. Like you've got a guy that's been an OC and it wasn't like he was fired for being a bad OC. In both situations of him being an OC, his head coach got fired.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Zimmer got fired his first year and Justin Jefferson put up his best statistical season with Klint Kubiak, going over 1,600 yards receiving. Dalvin Cook had a great year there as well in Minnesota, as well as Kirk Cousins. He goes to, you look at what he did even with New Orleans before the injuries. Derek Carr was on a pretty good pace to be one of the best passers in the NFL this year. And they had, at that time, averaged 9.1 yards per pass attempt in completion. So they were doing quite well in the passing game, and you had obviously a string of injuries that did occur that caused a lot of problems for the Saints offense this year. But I look at Klint Kubiak and I go, I feel like he's the guy that's going to put the best staff around him. I don't think we're going to lose him in a year to a head coaching gig. I really don't, unless somehow he really, truly lights the world on fire. I think he's more has a trajectory of being here for a couple of years. And I'm sure those were conversations that were had during this hiring process. Like, hey, look, we're looking for someone to come in here and build this and be a part of this program for a while. And maybe that's why the Hank Fraley or, even the Udinski offered or not offers, but opportunities didn't work out. Maybe there's just some misalignment there. And Klint Kubiak was the guy because it sounds like ever since Bobby Slowick got released from the Texans, Kubiak apparently even before that was working on getting this deal done with Seattle. So it's been in the works for a while for Seattle to kind of nail this Klint Kubiak hiring.
Yeah, and could point it out in the comments here. Will Reinford said, couldn't fail at OC back-to-back years. Everyone gets fired. The home runs are all head coaches right now. And that, I think that's true at least of Schneider. Like if the offense is more of the same, regardless of who's the quarterback, and they're the main reason Seattle doesn't win a playoff game or misses the playoffs, at the very least, Schneider's seat is significantly hot to the point of potentially untenable in the eyes of ownership. But also, as we said the last time we were together, the staff around Kubiak is important because let's say Kubiak ends up producing an elite Seahawks offense or something so good that he becomes a head coaching candidate and some team decides, guess what, you get to be a head coach. Well, if you have a good run game coordinator, a pass game coordinator, somebody around him that you can promote from within, then hopefully you can get some level of continuity of somebody who knows Kubiak's system and what he does and what he doesn't like to do. So, I mean, look at Detroit. They ended up going outside their own coaching tree to replace Ben Johnson. And I find that fascinating. They didn't promote Engstrand. They didn't promote Fraley to offensive coordinator. They only made him a run game coordinator. So, yes, getting the pieces around Kubiak is going to be just as important. And that means figuring out whether Huff stays, whether Pete's stays. There was an interview also with Travis Switzer, the Ravens run game coordinator. And we should point that out. They have been very, very reluctant or seemingly unwilling to bring in McDonald's former coaching staff assistants from Baltimore. But the fact that he was even getting a look because of his run game coordinator experience off of one season of which he got to coordinate a run game with Derrick Henry, that's not insignificant to me in the sense that if Huff gets canned, Switzer used to be an offensive lineman himself at Akron. Just the fact that he's been coaching so many different positions within Baltimore's organization, if Huff is canned or leaves for college or whatever, don't discount the potential for Switzer to get what would be objectively a promotion. So there's a lot at play here regardless of who they hire, but Kubiak in particular. I feel like there's a greater chance of Seattle having a clear identity with a healthy offense than we ever got with Grubb.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I just noticed one here in the comments here that came in from Casey. The extent of the Grubb slander is crazy work, acknowledging Kubiak and Jefferson and Cousins' success along with Carr. Like Geno didn't just set passing records and JSN didn't have a breakout year. Yes, he did do those things. He did incorporate that, but we also had one of the worst statistical run seasons we've had in Seattle in years.
Also,
Go ahead,
it's the balance, right? It's the identity. Yeah. It's. I think fans and Mookie and Bryce, you guys know, like I think people get caught up in statistics a little too much. Like the passing yards are great, the percentage is great, but if you're watching the games, you see there was never a flow, there was never an identity, right? And that's kind of the biggest takeaways that if you just don't even look at numbers. I think that Mookie, if you look at this and the way this defense is starting to build up. We had Chris Clough on the show about a week ago, and he believes this could be potentially a top 5 defense if they get the right pieces in place with Mike. The offense doesn't have to be anything crazy. Give me a 12 to 15 offense with a balanced attack. That's all you need. And I think that's why the Kubiak also makes sense, because I feel that's what you kind of know what you're going to get in that regard, and you don't have to light the world on fire. But you got the weapons in place and you got the running backs. Let's have balance. Let's have a balanced attack. And that's exactly what Grubb didn't bring, right? Bryce and I talked about 70-80% lining in shotgun last year. It was crazy. So I think to his point, you got to throw those numbers out because, like we said, you unlock JSN, but then you lock DK up. It felt tunnel vision in that regard, if you want to talk about guys unleashing. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most, just having this balanced attack, balanced offense, guy with some experience, and then let's start building up this defense too. I don't know where you guys take us.
Yeah, I want to add, I'll give Grubb credit for unlocking JSN in a way that Waldron could. And something that is also JSN can develop on his own.
Well, it's also his second year, right?
Also a second year. So, yes, Smith and Jigba was used much better. And also Geno trusted Smith and Jigba more. In a funny way, Metcalf missing 2 games kind of led to Smith and Jigba's breakout. Like, oh, wow, this guy really is at least a 1A type of receiver.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, Geno had a lot of passing yards because they were throwing the ball at a preposterous rate. If he's going to throw it almost 600 times, yeah, he better have north of 4,000 passing yards. And then the other part of it is it was 4,000 some odd passing yards, but they were not an explosive offense. I mean, on a per play basis, this is one of the least explosive offenses the Seahawks have had in years. To have, I think it was 4 plays all season, pass plays that is, over 40 yards. I mean, I feel like that is largely a coordinator issue. And yes, the offensive line was bad. And I've said this a million times. Grubb is not the first nor the last offensive coordinator to deal with a bad offensive line. And he did not do enough to mitigate and figure out ways to work around the offensive line issues, particularly the rate at which he put both tackles out on islands and the backup ones especially. So we know that Lucas missed a lot of time, but to have Forsyth out on an island as much as he did, and Fant for the 5 snaps he played, and even Jarrell, I don't think you're helping your offense that way. So by the time he tried to adjust, go under center more often, try and use a little more play action, it was already too late. There was no cohesiveness and or rhyme or reason to his game. So again, there is a chance that Grubb can become a good NFL coordinator down the line, but there are just too many things that I believe he wasn't grasping in terms of the differences between the college game and the NFL game, that it's not time for experimentation in the NFL. This is not that kind of business for it. So in the interest of CYA, it was the right move to move on from Grubb. And with Kubiak, yes, there is some hesitation over the fact that he's been on doomed coaching staffs. But again, it's not like it's his fault. 2021, as you said, Zimmer got fired. 2022, he was on the Nathaniel Hackett staff in Denver. So he got to coach Russell Wilson for a year. And he even called plays then because Hackett ceded the play calling duties late in the season. But by then it was kind of too late and everybody was going to get canned. And then Dennis Allen, of course, gets fired midseason, and they lost so many people to injury. So the one stable year he had, and we talked about this before we went on air, the one stable year he's had over the last 4 years was in San Francisco as the passing game coordinator to the point where Brock Purdy had a MVP finalist season, and the 49ers had probably the top offense in the league. So that certainly generated interest in Kubiak right there. So yes, the Grubb stuff, and I see some of the comments there. Grubb was pass happy with the Huskies. Yes, he does. Yes, he was, and he was justified in doing that.
100%.
Didn't really have the same kind of offense in Seattle to do what he did. And we saw the Corbin Smith reports about McDonald's frustrations with Grubb's play calling. It felt like he was trying to run an offense, a Husky style offense in the NFL without the pieces or the understanding of his own roster. And the Metcalf usage, I think, was not very good. Like, we didn't see nearly enough dig routes. We didn't see nearly enough slants with Metcalf. And it felt like part of the reason he had such down statistics is because of his usage.
Well, and that's the thing. And I noticed one in here. I just missed. It might have just popped away. Where did it go? Oh, actually, it's right here. So our super chat in here from Will. He goes, "Love the pod. Best guess from each of you on the run pass split and play action number. Go Hawks." Well, watching Kubiak's offense, honestly, you're gonna probably see something closer to anywhere between a 40-60 split, potentially on either side. It'll be a lot more even than the 70-30, almost 80-20 we saw last year in the pass happy side. For example, when he was, the OC in 2021 for the Vikings, Dalvin Cook, they were 5th in the NFL in rushing yards per game. They had 127.2 yards per game. Funny fact or interesting fact, Kennedy Polamalu was his running back coach, who is currently Seattle's running back coach. Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen at that point, had a lot of explosive plays down the field, but the offenses remain very, very balanced. Now, the thing that, I've heard, on 710 and Daniel Jeremiah came on and kind of talked about it when he was doing his, weekly hit there on 710 about how the issue with the Kyle Shanahan, Gary Kubiak kind of offense is, it doesn't have a great drop back pass game when you're behind by a lot. Well, I kind of preface that with when you're behind by a lot and you got to do a drop back pass, the team also knows you're going to do a drop back pass game. It doesn't lead you to have any success. But the one thing with a Kubiak Shanahan offense that I'm excited for is we're going to see a lot more variation in being under center again and not just in gun solely. We're going to see more 12 personnel, more 21 personnel. It's something that they ran with New Orleans last year, almost as much as the Ravens. I think them and the Ravens were the two top teams for 12 and 21 personnel in the NFL. And you're going to see boot action, which is something Geno can do quite well, actually, is, fake, get out onto the perimeter and kind of make some of these plays that, we've seen Stafford and Purdy and these guys. Like, they allow in this offense for quarterbacks to have easier reads. And that's the thing Geno needs. If Geno is to be the quarterback, I'm not saying he's going to be the quarterback, but if he is brought back as the quarterback, this system bodes well for making life a little bit easier on him because it relies more on the outside zone run game and then the variation of getting to the boot game off of it. And that might help Geno get a little bit more stable. And they're also not going to ask Geno to throw the ball 40 times in this offense. He's maybe the odd time if they're in a type of game that requires it. But most of the time, I think you'll see Geno's passing attempts come way down in this offense to the point where it's like anywhere between 25 and 30 a game. And that'll be like a normal Geno game, which I'm okay with. And that's fine to me because Geno's last game of the year versus the Rams, he only threw the ball 27 times. That was it. And he had his best statistical game as a pro in that game. So you can see where, yes, the numbers in that lead to Geno. Oh, he had a great year because he threw all these yards. And he also threw the ball more than he's ever thrown it, which leads to more yards. So the numbers and the stats kind of lean in that category. So, Will, to answer your question, I think you're going to see a much more balanced offense. And I think you're going to see a lot more play action than we have. And I'd put that play action number, if you want to take the pass game as a whole, I think you're going to see at least maybe 40% of it will be play action, which will be a nice increase from what we saw last year of the 10%.
Yeah. Will, appreciate the super chat. I'm not going to add much to that because you just broke it down beautifully. But yeah, I like that 60-40-ish ballpark and just the balance, man. Like, just a balanced offense. I just don't think we have to light the world on fire. But you know what? We have the pieces. You mentioned Justin Jefferson. Like, we have that kind of player. And I'm not saying DK is Justin, but we have that big, physical, fast, blow the top off the defense kind of guy. And so, it's going to be exciting to see what he can do with some of these guys as well. So, Mookie, what's your take on the run pass split play action percentage?
I think they're going to run it more. Not a guarantee they run it better, but run it more and through different looks. And again, if it's Shanahan, we're going to see a lot of outside zone run blocking scheme. It is a Shanahan based offense in effect, because of course Klint's dad is Gary. Gary not only played under, but coached alongside Mike Shanahan. So you're going to expect that sort of a scheme. But if you look at their under center rate, and I'm trying to pull up the Excel spreadsheet from FTN Fantasy, but 529 under center snaps, I believe. So they have the 5th most under center snaps. And I don't recall off the top of my head their shotgun rate, because of course the number of plays, you got to contextualize the rates at which you're going under center versus shotgun. But just that alone, I'm taking a wild guess that New Orleans ran under center a lot more than Seattle did. And the other thing you got to acknowledge with New Orleans is they have Taysom Hill and Seattle doesn't. So you're going to see some under center looks with Taysom Hill. You're going to see some more pistol. I hope they run more pistol actually this season than they did with Grubb. They hardly ran pistol offense. And when they did, it was pretty much always a run play. So fewer obvious tells is what I'm hoping for. And with that boot game, you're probably going to get more max protection. So if you watch the first 2 weeks of the Saints, you saw those deep shots to Rashid Shaheed, or they're running a little fake game and then throw it deep to the tight end. That's what I would like to see out of this offense. And yeah, more 12 personnel would be great. I feel like the trade-off, of course, when you're in 11 personnel so much, is you get to have Metcalf, Lockett, and JSN on the fields more. But if Lockett is likely to go, I'm fine with having Metcalf and JSN be your 2 receivers and have a really good receiving tight end, whether that is Barner making a year 2 leap, or if they keep Fant because he does have a year left on his contract, or, and maybe we can get into this a little later, they sign somebody like Jawan Johnson because he's a free agent from New Orleans and he's converted well from receiver to tight end. So they have options out of the heavier personnel that maybe we get like a mixture of the best parts of the Waldron offense and the best parts of Kyle Shanahan offenses, and maybe even some of the best of the Schottenheimer offenses. Now, a lower volume passing attack also means finer margins as far as game script, number of plays, and all that. So we got to take that into consideration. But there are certain quarterbacks where even if they're good, I don't want to see Geno throwing it 600 times or 650 times.
No.
The number of players who should be throwing the ball, who you trust to throw the ball north of 650 times in a 17-game season, are all like the top 3 quarterbacks in the league. Don't mind if Mahomes throws it 700 times, you're probably going to get still outstanding numbers. If Burrow throws it 700 times, he's going to produce MVP type numbers. But with Geno, he's not at that tier. So an offense that is more balanced, not to say 50-50 run, I think it's going to be like, say, 58-42 pass. It maximizes the efficiency of the offense under the quarterback they have right now. And I feel like that's the best way to run an offense, not for a quarterback to be leading everything, but for Geno to effectively play point guard, as opposed to constantly having everything on his shoulders when he's just not that kind of quarterback where you want everything on their shoulders.
So here's a breakdown kind of Klint Kubiak's offense last year with New Orleans. So pre-snap motion and play action for Kubiak, they had pre-snap motion on 88% of their pass plays, which led the NFL in that category, which was something we were all kind of sold on with Ryan Grubb last year in the offseason, was how much pre-snap motion he was going to bring. Play action was employed on 42% of their dropbacks, ranking 3rd in the league. So there's where you see that, to talk to what is play action game, pre-snap motion game. You'll see that come into effect, I think, a lot more with Kubiak than we saw last year, as well as their, we were talking about the split, in the run balance ratio of pass to run. They were a 56-44 run pass ratio on first downs, which is something that we missed last year. We didn't have in this offense. We were very much a throwing it on the early downs right out of the gate. We were going to throw, having more of that, run to pass ratio be a little bit more evened out. It'll kind of help get away from the pass heavy approach that we had. And honestly, we look back to the question before on, how much of their under center usage was. It was 70% of their offense was under center. So there is still gun, there is still pistol, but 70% of that offensive production comes out of being under center, which is something, again, you look at some of the teams that are remaining in the playoffs, whether it's the Eagles, whether it's, the Commanders this past weekend, even the Buffalo Bills, a lot of these teams have gone back to being under center a bit more in their run game and stuff, which I think leads to why we went this direction with our offensive coordinator hire. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how it all shapes up and kind of moves ahead and what coaches we see come back. Like you said at the very beginning of the show, Mookie, there's nobody guaranteed on the staff to come back. And just to, give some names of guys Kubiak has had on his staff prior when he was in Minnesota and, even in New Orleans, but, he had Kean McCardell was his receiver coach when Justin Jefferson had his career year. There's a potential. Maybe Kean McCardell becomes our new receiver coach. Butch Berry is an offensive line. John Benton as a, another offensive lineman that may end up coming through from New Orleans. Rick Dennison, who everyone keeps talking about, he was more brought on as a senior analyst to kind of help Kubiak last year than a run game coordinator. I think there's a good chance that maybe John Benton from New Orleans, who has 33 years of experience, is the guy that they bring in. So it'll be really interesting to see who he brings on the staff with him, because it's not just Klint Kubiak coming.
Mm-hmm. And I finally pulled up the spreadsheet from FTN Fantasy. I think you got to flip 69% of their offense was in shotgun and not under center. So it's the other way around, I think. But still, that's near the bottom of the league. Mm-hmm. And Seattle was at 82%. Wow. So I would anticipate more under center. And the fact that they were trailing as often as they did indicates that game script was not necessarily the reason for that. And look, I don't know if Spencer Rattler is going to be much anything. That rookie season was definitely not encouraging, but he was also behind backup offensive linemen throwing to 7th, 8th, and 9th string wide receivers. So if you saw some of Rattler's starts, they tried to get under center play action boot going. We know that Carr has got the arm to throw deep down the field to Shaheed, and Gino has got that sort of arm too. So again, there are going to be some things from the New Orleans offense that we saw that may give us some pause, but there's always going to be context there, which is after the first 2 weeks, admittedly against bad defenses, things started to go south for them. But I don't care which offensive coordinator you have. I dare you to produce an above average or even an average offense with Jake Haener or Spencer Rattler quarterback.
Yeah.
Ruiz missing as much time as he did. I forgot the other dude who's normally one of New Orleans' better offensive linemen, also missing a considerable amount of time. Kamara eventually got hurt. Taysom Hill eventually got hurt. They're down Olave. They're down Shaheed. They're down some other dude. They were playing Dante Pettis, significant snaps, man, in 2024. Yeah. So with that many people missing, it's really, really hard to manage a coherent offense. Imagine any Seahawks offensive coordinator, whether it's Grubb or Bevel or Schottenheimer, having to make something magical out of Jaron Hall at quarterback with Kenny McIntosh and George Kalani as your main backs, although maybe some would prefer that.
Stone on tackle.
Yeah. Backups at left at tackle, backups on the interior, considering how bad the starters were at times. No Metcalf, no JSN, no Lockett. So you're asking Jaron Hall to throw passes to Jake Bobo and Derek Young. Yeah. Of course, that offense is going to suck out loud. So I'm going to give Kubiak a chance just off of the context of what happened in New Orleans.
Yeah, and that's why there's a resume to go with that too, which I think gives you a little more confidence, like we just talked about with the Minnesota and the San Francisco, and where you got Brock Purdy and Kirk and Jefferson. So I think everybody that, like you just mentioned, you just drew the landscape there in New Orleans and how hurting it was, that you can't really even look at that as far as what he's going to do here, because he just didn't have the pieces. But the biggest thing is, man, we're moving forward. To finally, like you said, the OC search is done. We have our guy, and now you can progress. Are we going to you want to get into some cap talk, or real quick? I want to ask you this real quick, because I know this might tie into cap. I think it's going to tie into cap. Gino, obviously, we're going to bring up cap stuff. He's right now, it stands, he'll be the biggest cap hit. Any thought of, just throwing it out there, throwing ideas, any thought of a Derek Carr coming over here, getting him on a friendly deal as your bridge, and then you draft a dude? Any chance, or you think no?
I am pretty sure that the Saints are in deep doo-doo as far as their cap situation. I mean, Carr's cap number for next year is $51.458 million. And if they get rid of him, if they cut him, that's $50 million in dead money. If they cut him post June 1st, it's still $21 million in dead money.
Right.
And if they do any trades their best hope is a post June 1st trade, and they're going to spread out the dead money over multiple seasons. So I think they're kind of tied to Carr for next season. So unlikely. And I know it might get brought up. Kirk Cousins cannot move. So I don't think not like he can't move from Atlanta. It's like he cannot move. And that is enough for me to not want him in Seattle.
I would not take him over.
If you saw the play action stuff Atlanta was doing with him for 14 weeks and then watched the play action they were doing with Penix for 4 weeks, it's like night and day. They were essentially hiding their own quarterback for almost the entire season. And it is a main reason they missed the playoffs. So Cousins is a non-starter for me when you can just keep Geno. And then Derek Carr's got no shot to be anywhere but New Orleans for another year.
Beauty.
All right. So you guys want to get into the over the cap simulator and kind of go through how we can give Seattle potentially some options to go get some guys in free agency?
Yeah. And at the same time, when we're doing this, guys, flood the comment section. Give us your thoughts of who Seattle, if there's somebody in the league that you think might, hey, this guy could be a fit, toss it out there. We can answer, would it fit, would it not? So yeah, flood the comment section as we're going along here, because we want to definitely hear your guys' thoughts on all this as well.
All right, let me bring this up here on the screen. Okay, so we're on over the cap here. So let's have a look here. So as we can tell, Seattle's kind of in the not so good area there, $27 million worth of cap space, which is a negative this year so far. So let's look at this. So these are the free agents we have: Lincoln Tomlinson, Jaron Reed, Ernest Jones, Jonathan Hankins, Pharaoh Brown, Kayvon Wallace, Gibson, Trey Brown, Stone Forsythe, Josh Jobe, Artie Burns, Darden, Cody White, Brady Russell, Ogaju, and Josh Ross.
Yeah.
So when I look at that and kind of think about it, like, the only one out of that list besides Ernest Jones, I'm really tempted to actually potentially bring, or three guys I'm potentially to bring back out of that list. Josh Jobe is a RFA, so they can tender him essentially. It's Jaron Reed, Ernest Jones, and Josh Jobe. Even Artie Burns I would bring back as a camp guy just because he does provide some veteran presence in that room, and I don't think Trey Brown will be back. So at least you're not going into camp with Nehemiah Pritchett and Wolin and Spoon as your only corners. You've at least got some depth there that can change depending on who you take, if you take anybody in this draft class.
I agree. I agree with Artie for sure. I think especially the way you kind of saw how this played out. At the beginning of last year, you'd probably be like, nah, if you look at this list now, because you said Trey's probably gone. Even Wolin's question mark, just long term. I think Artie's as a veteran. Yeah, for sure.
So how do you want to start with this, Mookie? Total existing dead money is $250,000 carrying over.
Yeah, and that's don't have to pay Adams or Diggs anymore, right? So
this is true. We don't.
That's the good news. But of course, if they cut anybody here, then there could be some dead money taken on. But if you want to look at the free agents, I feel like the free agents for Seattle, it's pretty easy to figure out. For the restricted, I think you tender Jobe. Whether Darden's here or not, I don't care, because
I think you can get him again at some point.
Yeah, just do not, under any circumstances, repeat the D. Williams experience at the return game. They need to have like actual options here, because this year was a joke. I would keep Jaron Reed. I think he can, especially with how many defensive linemen are on the market. I think it's actually going to lower Reed's value, because he's not a tier 1 free agent. So he would otherwise be like a second week signing. So I think that you can retain Reed. But other than him and Jones, who are the priorities, you're not losing sleep over everybody else. Like Pharaoh Brown, sayonara, buddy.
Yeah.
Hankins is, he's whatever. I feel like they can just draft somebody in the 4th or 5th round and get similar productivity as just a rotational defensive tackle or nose tackle. I mean, get an actual nose tackle, though. Like Hankins doesn't fit the bill to me. Kayvon Wallace, no, don't need to keep him. Gibson, absolutely not. Like that Lions game was all I needed to see. kind of a draft, kind of a wasted throwaway of a 6th-round pick. But the only reason they did is because Nwosu got hurt.
Yeah.
Tomlinson, don't resign. Burns, probably a camp body you can sign on veterans minimum for the millionth time and put him on the practice squad for the millionth time. Trey Brown, no resign. I mean, it's not just the fact that he had a down year; it's also the fact that he got injured again. So his injury history is too much to ignore. Job, as I said, tender him, and then everybody else is a.
I don't see a need to bring any of the other guys back. You can
Yeah, and if you do, it's camp body. So like Brady Russell, camp body as an ERFA. Stone Forsythe, and good evening, Dan. Forsythe.
Hey.
We don't need to keep. Well, Dan, we're so jealous of you because you're at the Senior Bowl.
You're at Senior Bowl.
Oh no,
we're all out here, so we have to have at least Seahawks media presence at the Senior Bowl, or Seahawks podcast presence, since the Seahawks themselves love them some Senior Bowl people. But yeah, everybody else, Cody White's, Jamie Sher, those are guys that can be hanging around during training camp and are fringe roster players. But I'm kind of happy that they don't have so many pressing needs in terms of free agent must resigns. It's a matter of the people on the roster right now, and that's what we're getting to. The crux of it is, who do you keep and who do you let go so you can bring in some outside free agents?
Yeah, Bryce, why don't you talk about who on this roster right now are you looking at?
So for me, really, like Ernest Jones, Jaron Reed are the only two main focal points out of this free agent class for Seattle for me. Like everyone else is kind of you could throw an offer again. Josh Job's an RFA, so you just have to tender him, and I don't think you have to give him an expensive tender. You can probably get away with a 3rd level tender. Artie Burns, again, he's a guy you sign as camp depth. Like, hey, if we lose somebody, we can plug in Artie Burns. Otherwise, he gets on the practice squad. Nobody else, like Kayvon Wallace was injured most of the year. You don't bring back Lincoln Tomlinson. Like none of these other guys to me at all even have much of a conversation to be had about them. I think that you can find replacements at younger points, whether it's late in the draft or through free agency, that are going to come in and give you the same production and maybe at a cheaper value. Like this, for example, this D tackle class in free agency, as well as the draft, is super deep. You can find yourself a replacement for Jonathan Hankins that might serve you more than a 1-year carryover and give you more production than he did in Mike McDonald's defense. So it'll be something that, I'm interested to see how they attack it. But what we'll do, so I'm thinking with this, why don't we go with guys that are on the active roster that we don't think will be back, and then we'll start plugging in some of the free agency and see how much cap space we end up with at the end of the exercise. That sound like a good idea?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just go from the side here. We'll go top down. Geno Smith. Do we leave him on? Because I don't think he's coming back to play at the $44 million cap hit right there.
Yeah, that's a given.
So
that's a restructure.
Yeah, I think they will restructure his deal and short-term extension, but I'm not even confident in that. But I think they're going to at least try and keep him on the roster, because if John wants to keep competing for a Super Bowl, and now that Jaden Daniels is out in the NFC Championship game, despite his heroics, the moment you start a rookie quarterback is almost the admission that we are not winning the Super Bowl this year. We're not even going to it, because history has proven plenty of times, try as you might, you don't go to the Super Bowl with a rookie quarterback. But doesn't mean you don't draft a rookie quarterback, that's for sure. But Geno, that cap hit, I think they're going to adjust it.
I think they'll adjust it. So do we go with a extend or renegotiate or cut? And then they potentially bring it back at a different situation, extend and renegotiate?
I could see an extend renegotiate at a certain number. I think they're going to be hard line at a certain number of that, instead of a flat out cut and let him, all of a sudden he's a Raider or something.
Okay. So with that being said, here we go. This is the part that we go into. So 2025 base salary. This is how it comes out for him. Mm-hmm. So we add 2 years to this and lower the hit?
Sure.
Yeah.
So what are we going to give him then in 2025? I say his base salary is probably around that range, but I think the non-prorated bonus probably comes down.
Mm-hmm.
What do we say a non-prorated bonus?
Phew. That's tough. I mean, it's got to be a few million less. I think they'll give him a healthy signing bonus for sure.
Yeah. I'll say this. I'm going to go with 11.
Mm-hmm.
Even. Oh, no. I want that to be 11.
Yeah, that'll really F up the cap number there.
There we go. We'll keep that. Okay. I think his prorated bonus may come down even more. Like, I think this is a situation where his base salary might get to be the high point of that conversation like it is right now. I still think 39 is too much for Gino. What do you guys think?
Yeah, they're probably going to
I
maybe
do.
shave 10 million off, like from 44 to 34 they could deal with, and then kind of punt a stronger cap number to the future.
So if we go with 9, let me just go with 9 million here. It'll work for me because it doesn't currently want to.
And I know we got somebody in the comments, Mike A. Hi, Mike, saying the Raiders or Cleveland will take him to trade it. I think the problem is with Gino, with his age and his contract, it's not going to be a high value trade.
I don't think it will be. I'm going to say this. I do agree with Mike's point. I think the Raiders may be an interested team. I think there's conversation
I do too.
that with Pete could be, and it comes back to like if Seattle goes to Gino and says, okay, cool. So next year you're going to play on, let's just mess around with this and, drop maybe, I'll say this down to 12. Oop, that was an 8. My apologies. Ooh, no. Let me get rid of this altogether. There we go. Doesn't really want to work with me, guys. There we go. So if we go to 34 even, I wonder if Gino gets annoyed at that offer and thinks he's more in the $40 million range like Trevor Lawrence and them, and it doesn't end up working. So, if we lower Gino's hit, that's what it ends up being. Now, I'm not going to play around with the rest of this because it's going to take too long.
Yeah.
Say if Gino's number is 34, right? So we drop his number and it hits out at 34 for next season. Just say hypothetically, what are we doing with DK? Are we cutting him or are we just leaving his contract as is? What are we doing?
Well, you're extending DK, aren't you?
It's either going to be a trade or extend with him. He's not getting cut. If he gets cut, then
it'll cost him too much.
It'll hit him in the dead cap. But that's why I think so. Like, do we think DK's on this roster next year?
I think 100% he's on the roster. That's my thing. I think John's absolutely extending. I think Mike McDonald loves the guy, and I think Kubiak's going to want him. I think you're almost. This is just me. I think I'm like 99% sure this guy's going to be on the roster.
Here's the thing I'm saying. The Gino part of this, because I see everyone freaking out in the comics. I misspoke. I didn't mean cut. I apologize. I meant trade. I meant Gino is either on this roster or he's off this roster. I meant DK. DK to me is an interesting point here because you're probably giving DK $100 million in his contract. It'll be a 3-year, probably $100 million contract for DK Metcalf.
Right.
That's a lot of money. I'm just putting this out there. That is a lot of money to pay a receiver when the usage of the receiving core, particularly in Kubiak's system, is not 3 receiver based. It now goes to 2 receivers, and tight ends become a more vocal point in that offense.
But we just talked about Justin Jefferson, right?
I know we did, but
Tyler Lockett probably will not be here.
I don't ever want to put DK and Justin Jefferson in the same conversation.
No. Well, no. But he's a number 1 receiver, and he's got I don't think he's hit his ceiling. But he's a great receiver. I mean, I'm not going to downplay DK Metcalf. So
I'm not downplaying him. I'm thinking of the logistics side of it where DK for 3 years, he's what? He'll be DK?
He'll still be
28
under 30.
So you sign him for 3 years, he'll be 31.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, just turned 28. He'll be 30. He can still you can be an explosive receiver at 30, 31 still. Especially the way
the point where you would think about moving on from once you hit most receivers at 30 or 31 who are not guaranteed Hall of Famers, those are going to be the ones who start to hit their decline at some point. And also, I would counter the Eagles are in the Super Bowl right now. I know they don't run anywhere near the same offense as Kubiak offense would, but they paid AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, and that could be the same structure for Seattle. And if Seattle's going to run more 12 personnel, fine. You're going to have Metcalf and JSN out there. I think the allocation of wide receiver money changes if we move on from Tyler Lockett. And then suddenly, that's to me, that's the bigger thing there, where if Lockett is gone.
I'm completely playing devil's advocate here, guys. I'm in camp of keeping DK. I think they're going to use DK well in this new offense. I'm just presenting the devil's advocate side
Well,
of it.
but if you had a percentage, like, do you think he's going to be in this roster? Like, is there a question about it? Because I don't think there is. I think just with, like you said, if John's actually thinking he's a few pieces away and he's retooling and this defense is going to be the way it might be, and you just brought in this guy, a new offensive coordinator, do you want to have that start that without DK Metcalf, without Tyler Lockett, and now you're saying JSN, you're our number one guy? You don't even know how that's going to work out. Guys mentioned, Grubb unleashed him. Yeah. Well, how every week we talk about how now DK's become a decoy, right? I mean, I wouldn't want to start an offense like that if I'm Klint.
It's but you're going to bring in guys. So let's do this. Instead of talking about the DK part of it, let's go with guys we know we aren't going to see on this roster and that are on it. So Tyler Lockett, we all believe is going to be off this roster, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tyler is now off the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that was a pre-cut. There's, we're now sitting at
Draymond.
Yeah.
Draymond is not going to be on this roster.
Draymond gone.
Yep.
Okay. So now you're at 11 million. We are now at 11 million in cap space.
Yeah. Let's just keep going.
No offense.
Well, let's go Chenna.
I think Chenna's going to be here.
Yeah, either play on his deal or restructure, like restructure his deal.
Okay, we're just going down to obvious cuts. Okay, so Chenna, it's either restructure or
is Noah Fant back?
I think he's gone.
Yeah, I think he's not a bad tight end. It's just that he's not a good enough blocker.
Correct.
And he's also like an all right receiver, but he's anything special. The
Right.
fact that Barner produced as much as he did, I think makes Fant even more expendable. And again, if it's like Barner, Jawan Johnson, and another rookie tight end, or even Brady Russell becomes a tight end 3, I'm totally cool with that. Russell can become like that third tight end H-back role. Shockingly, I think Devin Witherspoon is safe.
Yeah, no kidding. Rayshawn Jenkins, I don't think will be on this roster at that cap hit, so he's gone.
He's gone, yeah.
Robertson Harris won't be on the roster at that cap. I think they may try and bring him back, but it'll be in a different situation.
Cut him. Yeah, and then
kind of like Dunlap, where they cut him and then brought him back on a different deal.
Right.
Yep. I don't think George Fant will be back.
Fant's gone. Yeah, I think
Woolen will stay, and then
another year.
Else, I think Cameron Young is going to be on thin ice, but he's probably going to be somebody who will just get cut in camp.
I think Derek Young will be a guy that gets cut in camp. Let's see here. Who else is on this roster?
I mean, you're looking now. It's costing you hardly.
Now, I will throw this out at you in a way. I wonder if, as much as he had a great year, I wonder if they start looking at moving on from Jason Myers.
You know what's interesting? I don't know if you saw this tweet at the Senior Bowl.
They were watching a kicker work out.
Right.
Yeah. It's one of those where Myers is 35 and field goal kicking is notoriously volatile. And he's not a cheap kicker. And Myers he's got a strong leg, but he doesn't have a Brandon Aubrey mega strong leg, such that his recent attempts from 60 have been well short, whether indoors or outdoors. But I don't remember how many years Myers has left on his deal. So he might have like 2 years left. So they might just be thinking about it as far as Myers. But, everybody else, you could be looking at like Woolen. I think that even though we've had our discussions about whether they look to trade him or not, I think that they'll keep him. I feel like the cupboard is going to get increasingly bare if you move on from Woolen and you don't have like a requisite cornerback. Yes. Because what Pritchett showed just in that Rams game is like he is not remotely close to ready for NFL. No. He needs.
You dropped in a corner. You think that could?
I think corner becomes a draftable spot for the Hawks.
And you keep Woolen, and then I think. Depend like if you had another year like this, Mookie, are you just letting him walk? I mean, because like we talked about, he looks like he could cost some money just based on that raw talent alone and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But is that kind of maybe a situation?
He's probably one of the few Seahawks who is tradable for like decent draft capital.
Third or fourth round pick, probably.
Yeah. But it's just that when he's at his best, he looks like one of the top corners in the league.
Yeah.
But when he makes mistakes, it's like it's a concentration thing. So I feel like it's more mental with him as much as it can be physical at times. But the fact that he got on McDonald's bad side for the partying or whatever he did that got him his benching, that feels a little ominous, but I think they're going to keep him. To me, corner is still a need.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me wondering if they would consider just moving Witherspoon to the outside.
Right.
And not, or at least having him be outside more as opposed to being predominantly a slot corner. Because look at what Kansas City did with McDuffie. They moved him to the outside, and he started out as a slot. He doesn't have the same profile, and he is kind of like smaller in terms of stature, but I think he can hang on the outside just fine. I think he's got the athleticism, but yeah, corner is definitely a need for Seattle just for depth purposes, but I feel like Woolen is going to stay. So really the crux of Seattle's cap situation is dependent on the futures of Geno, Metcalf, Lockett, Draymond, and Fance, George, and Noah, and Rayshon Jenkins. So they can open up a fair amount of cap space just through restructures or just moving on from guys. And if they restructure Metcalf, I mean, that's going to open up more cap space in the immediate for 2025.
Well, that's what I'm messing around with right now is I'm messing around with the restructure that we kind of think DK is going to see. So I'll get these numbers in here, see how it works out. But when you guys talk about Woolen and that whole thing that's a pretty damning thing to be in your third year now and have it where you as a player are being called out and benched by your head coach because you're out partying, you're not focused in games, that type of stuff. That's kind of a damning thing. It makes me really wonder when I think about, do you really look at, like, if a team walks up to you and says, hey, look, we'll give you a 3rd or 4th round pick in this year's draft. Do you not take that for Rick Woolen?
I think you consider it.
He's not worth a first, but
no.
He would probably be a day 2 pick because of his advanced stats are still pretty good. It's just that his bad plays are so bad. And yes, he's been benched for 2 different reasons. One was off the field, and the other one was on the field and the shitty efforts he was given in terms of tackling and wrapping up guys in the run game. But it's not like these things aren't correctable.
Right.
But the other side of it, of course, is he's extension eligible now.
Yeah.
And if you want to extend him, that was probably the time to do it, meaning like this offseason. I feel like Woolen has become a lightning rod because that rookie season was so much better than we thought it would be. Yeah. And then the second year wasn't as good. And then the third year, he was still pretty good. It's just that some of the same frustrations kept surfacing. So I feel like McDonald is going to keep at it with Woolen. Because if you don't, you better have a better option, or at least an equally good option, or somewhere in that general. No, Woolen should not be a backup. So, no,
Mike says he should be a backup if you keep him. But I think you can. What I'll say to Mike's point, though, is I think you need to give this guy more competition and not just kind of assume he's the opposite corner of Witherspoon. Like, if they can draft a guy in round 2 or round 3 that's going to give you an actual legitimate option of when you move on from Woolen, I think that's a good thing. I don't think you can let Woolen go into camp and think his job's just safe because he does have amazing physical attributes and he's, been decent outside of his rookie year when he was probably the best he was his rookie year.
I think I don't even know if you need to do that. I think to Mookie's point, he's got benched 2 separate times. I think he knows that his job's on the line. I don't think they necessarily need to bring in, quote unquote competition. They could flat out cut him and go get another guy. Like if they don't want him. But I agree. It's I think with Mike, I think we expected a little more out of Woolen. Like, okay, this guy's going to turn him around. He's going to get his head on straight, focused. Because it's not from a talent perspective as far as raw talent's concerned. It's all the other stuff, putting it all together, putting a full season together, the mental mistakes, the partying, whatever. It's the mental mistakes all the time consistently. So I agree. I think I'm sort of at the stage where they bring him back because I think Mike's thinking, look, this guy's got so much talent. I'm going to give it one more shot. But again, I think if it's not working out, then it's you're not going to pay him. I think it's one of those things where he's on the cheap that you can just let's give it another go with this guy because he is such a physical freak. And if the same things start happening, then whatever. Like we brought in a Josh Jobe. It's not like you can't. It's not if Mike doesn't like what he is doing on the field, culture wise, mentality wise, he'll get rid of him. they'll get rid of him. But I think they might still drop together. But I just think for Woolen, I think it's just one of those things where because of talent, and I didn't like a lot of the things you saw, but I think if you're Mike, you say, look, give me another year with this guy and let me figure this guy out. Because like you said, Mookie, if he can put it all together and be locked in, now that's easier said than done. Some guys just aren't built like that. So it could come down to like, he's just not built like that. He's got all the physical talent in the world, which a lot of guys do. And he's just so physically talented that he was able to make the NFL. That doesn't mean it's going to translate to being locked in like a Devin Witherspoon. So, but I think Mike's going to give it another go.
Yeah, and also suppose Woolen has a good year, but not good enough to resign, and he walks in free agency. Well, that's comp pick time, assuming Seattle. That's the best case scenario is he walks as a comp pick, and he gave you good years as a rookie. Is Adderall still banned by the NFL?
I believe it is, sadly.
Darn it, because I just had the greatest idea.
You were thinking Brandon Browner 2.0 in some respects.
Just the idea how to keep him locked in.
Just to get back to the cap exercise here, guys. So I messed around with DK's thing, basically gave him 32 over the next 3 years, dropped his cap hit down here, as you see. So his cap hit next year would be around 20.8. But you look up in the top of 2025 cap space, we've now made $46 million by cutting the guys we did, doing a couple restructures, which we guessed at in this. I'll get better with the calculator as the offseason goes. You can see there are moves for this team to create cap space for itself. Not still without bringing back, obviously, Ernest Jones, which I can assume only with John Schneider and them that the first year of that will be a more team-friendly-ish cap hit, with still giving him what he wants overall as a contract. And that would bring back Jaron Reed and, Josh Jobe as well on that. So the Seahawks do have an ability to get some money and get into this free agency and potentially go get some upgrades at certain spots, whether it's cornerback, like Mike's alluded to here, in getting an upgrade at the cornerback position or obviously on the offensive line.
Yeah, and just to put a bow on this, the fact that you can open up quite a bit of cap space with the moves that we made, and you could potentially open up more if you move on from Geno or whatever. The fact that they don't really have too many free agents of their own worth keeping or like an absolute priority, more of that money would go to outside free agents potentially, and of course, signing your own draft picks, as opposed to, all right, we've opened up this cap space, we got 5-6 guys we really want to keep. So that's a big distinction to make. So the fact that they're in the red right now might seem alarming, but they're going to pull some levers. They're going to make moves, as opposed to the alternative. Yes. I had to bring up the Adderall because that was vintage cheat Hawks. Everybody thought that was only locking people down because they were just so focused. They were like the Riddle and Wonder kids.
But this is the thing too with the cap situation for Seattle, even going past, what they decide to do at the quarterback position. Because I'm in the camp, especially with this draft class of quarterbacks, and you heard even Jim Nagy talk about it today at the Senior Bowl press conference. And I know Dan Viens is probably going to do his show in a bit, where he actually got to be there. He has press credentials, and he asked Jim Nagy a bunch of questions. And one of the ones I heard, I don't think Dan asked it, but someone asked about the quarterback class, and he said, it's not the same as last year's, but last year's is almost a unicorn draft class with the amount of draftable first-round graded quarterbacks that you had. This year, I think, is not as bad as the Kenny Pickett draft class with Malik Willis and Desmond Ridder.
That was bad.
This draft class, I think, lines up better for teams that are kind of in the Seahawks situation where you may have an established veteran who you're still trying to push for a playoff spot with, and can go get a guy that you can groom for a year or two and then hand the keys over to him. Like if the Seahawks ended up with a Will Howard, Jackson Dart, Kyle McCord, those type of guys in this draft class, it could be a situation where it sets up better for Seattle in the long run. And if it doesn't work with one of the guys you take this year and you put them out in the preseason and it's horrible and it's as bad as what we saw from Sam Howell at points this year, then guess what? The 2026 class has still got good quarterbacks. You can maybe move up, because the more Seattle fills out its roster with this young talent, the less the draft capital has to stay around, that you can, eventually push it into, hey, we're making a move up in the draft to go get a guy at the top end of the board.
Yeah, because 2026 should have Drew Aller, what's his name at LSU, Garrett Nussmeier, and I'm ready to hop up back on the Nuss bus with another year because there was like a 3-4 week stretch where it looked like he looked like a dude who needed another year in college, and the same probably applies to Drew. So I think it's better off for certain guys to stay another season to build up their hype, so to speak. And there's a part of me wondering if Schneider would consider trying to if he's going to make any big moves, would be to try and get a 2026 first out of somebody. And that does not mean moving on from a player to get that 2026 first, because as anybody can remember, how did Seattle get Earl Thomas? They traded their second round pick, traded out of the second round completely, gave it to Denver for their 2010 first. And the Broncos took an absolute busted corner, and Seattle was able to get a mid-first round pick. So they could, because they have draft picks in every round this year, see this as this is not a super amazing draft. And I think Nagy and others have kind of alluded to it. There are a lot of teams who don't have first round grades on but 10 or 11 players.
Yep.
Could see this as an opportunity to gain extra capital in 2026 and be more judicious with who they pick in 2025. And even still, doesn't mean that you still don't take a flyer on a quarterback in the 5th or 6th round. What I'm getting at is based on Nagy's comments about this, the quarterback class. Yeah, it's not as bad as the Willis, Kenny Pickett's, that particular draft class where Brock Purdy did insane heavy lifting to make that class anything but one of the worst we've ever seen. But this is probably also not a class where a guy is going to artificially magically become a first-round pick. So like after Sanders and Ward, I don't think Jackson Dart's going to make some big push into the mid-first. He might be a second-round pick, but we still got the combine in this week's Senior Bowl to figure it out.
Yeah.
What you're going to get is a lot of quarterbacks to me who are going to be dispersed in day 2 and day 3, which is different from last year where it was the 6 quarterbacks in the top 12 and then literally nobody until Rattler in the 5th. That was a very top-heavy quarterback class. Like it was plentiful top-heavy, but it's just like the gap between those 6 and quarterback 7 was so wide compared to there is not as wide a gap here, but there are also not as many first-round caliber quarterbacks. So it could break out in such a way that Seattle might have options available pretty much in any round they want if they're interested in certain quarterbacks.
Well, and that's the thing that I think lines up best for them in this. Like, I think Jim Nagy even said that he has maybe, I think he said 10 to 15 grade 1s for guys this year. And doing my own big board with Dan, I've only really come out with maybe 10 or 11 guys that really are true, like first round talented players. It's not a great class for that. This is more of a fill roster holes kind of draft class. It isn't go out and find your blue chip star players. If you're not one of the top teams picking in the top 10, you're more looking at, hey, if we're at pick, like Seattle pick 18, really we're taking a second round talented guy at pick 18. Maybe we can trade back, acquire more capital, do what Mookie says, trade a pick later on for a first rounder in 2026, but you can still fill out your board with some talent on there. And that's where, for me, like if Seattle takes a quarterback and it's, in the second round late, or it's I'd be more comfortable if it was in the third, probably for me, and it's on a Will Howard or a Kyle McCord or Jackson Dart, I'm much more comfortable with that and going, okay, great. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we've got more capital to go get one next year in 2026 where there's Drew Aller, there's Garrett Nussmeier. The quarterback class just looks a lot better in 2026. We'll see how it performs in the college football season next year. But overall, there's more higher-end talent, I think, in that class than there is in this one. Not saying this one's bad. It's just I don't see the game changers, that you kind of want to see if you're going to take a quarterback in the top 2 rounds of the draft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just like last week's national championship game, you saw Riley Leonard's no doubt tough. He's got great toughness. That first drive was incredible. It's just him running quarterback, doing QB power and QB off tackle over and over and over again until he was puking. But as a passer, I don't think he's got a great arm, and he seems to bail after his first read a lot. Howard looks like he has more pro level traits. So I think that I could get behind the idea of Will Howard a lot more than I could get behind the idea of Riley Leonard, where there's a bit too much Daniel Jones in him. So there's that comment from Dan. There are only 7 or 8 who get in first round grades. Yeah, and again, it could adjust. It could get higher or maybe stay the same depending on what happens to the combine with interviews and medicals, all that sort of stuff. But You look at mock drafts right now, and you see how many guys are going from like the first round all the way to the lower second. That the draft grade is so wide. And
I got to give Crumpled Zinc here a shout out. We could always bring up Magoo from the Stallions.
yes,
The only other quarterback besides Russell Wilson we have drafted, Alex Magoo. Well done.
Look at it this way. Russell Wilson never got an MVP vote. I do know that Alex Magoo won the USFL MVP. So
That is fair. That is very fair.
draft MVP caliber quarterback.
Russ was leading for a few games there, and let Russ cook with shoddy the first part of the season. I actually
But he
thought
never managed to get a
no,
vote.
no. I know how the second half went down, but man, remember that first half? I was like sitting there, like, man, just give this man the MVP.
If,
I mean,
all right.
Ranked choice voting existed at the time where you could get 5 points for first and three, Russ would have he would have had some MVP points
for sure.
But he's never had a season where you could truly justify giving him an undisputed first place MVP. That includes the 2017 season where he was doing way too much because they had no running game and a terrible offensive line. But
yeah. They were putting
Breeze never got an MVP vote either. So it's not the be all end all.
No, it
okay,
is
guys. Let's get into some viewer Q&As because there's been a lot that have come throughout the show, and we've been at this for about hour 15. So let's get into some of these.
Few minutes here. Pop this one up. New OC, second year head coach. JS probably on the warm seat. We talked about that a lot. So Filipino mad saying they can't get rid of Gino or DK unless they're getting a Russ-like trade value. I mean, I kind of brought that up as far as if you're the first year OC. Gino and DK, right? Especially DK. I mean, you just like we talked about with Mike, coming in. Do you want to come in with a rookie quarterback? With Mike McDonald in his first year, when we were talking about that last year. So, what's your guys think? I mean, you're not going to get a Russ-like trade value for either of them, but I kind of get what he's saying.
No, and this is why I think there's a good chance they're going to renegotiate with both of them. To be honest, I think if I was to give a percentage, I think there's more of a chance DK is back and in comparison to Gino. I think 100%. Gino, even listening to Brady Henderson and a lot of the beat reporters, Brady's pretty tapped in with the Seahawks, and he seems to be kind of wavering on if Gino's back, and he seems more 50-50 on it than anything. I think
I've been 50-50 on it for a while. I think, and you kind of hinted at it at the beginning of this show too, right? And like what you just said. It's still we leaned extension, but are we surprised if they go in a different direction? Maybe not, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I had to wager who would be more likely to be let go, it would be Gino. If they trade DK away, the only thing that would justify trading DK is if they get another receiver back, who's already on an NFL roster. I know there was that Chargers prediction from that unidentified AFC executive. We better make sure that executive is not on the Charger staff. And there might be a little bit of bias there because we've seen their receivers not named Lad McConkey. They need any receiver help they can get. But if DK is not traded for a receiver in return, I don't want the draft capital that badly because if we assume Lockett's gone, and there's still a chance they could just restructure his deal for one more, a last ride sort of thing. But
kind of cool.
I just don't think it's I don't think it's practical to do that. As great as he's been, there comes a point where you got to make tough calls and move on from legends. And I think Seattle's kind of had an issue not doing that over the years. But yes, they can't get rid of Gino or DK unless they're getting Russ-like trade value. They're not going to get it out of Gino. And if they move on from Gino this year, we are on the assumption that they are thinking a lot more about the long term than they are about trying to really compete in 2025 because the free agent options at quarterback, you're looking at Wilson and Pittsburgh might resign him. And even so, no, I don't want Russ back on anything but a one-day contract to have him announce his retirement after a tremendous career.
Sounds like he wants to stay a Steeler.
Yeah.
And they're making a decision between the two. Yeah, but we're real quick. I think Lockett on a deal with maybe a Raider for a year with Pete. Just get down there. I'm not saying it's gonna happen. I think he retires. I think he's, like you said, either he gets super cheap here or he's doing his real estate, he's got his family here. I mean, but you never know. Pete might be calling, right?
Yeah. I just saw a comment here from 3D Tables on our little sidebar here. Pete might end the Seahawks himself if they send DK to Harbaugh. I did not think of that. That would be unbelievably hilarious.
That is funny.
Here, we'll give you your opponent a weapon to use against you there, Pete. Here's a good one from Corey. Who are you guys looking forward to learning more about in the Senior Bowl this week?
Xavier Restrepo, the Miami wide receiver. I have been a fan of his game the last 2 seasons. And again, not the biggest receiver in the world, but he seems to run routes well and he's got great hands. So I still think that regardless of what happens with Metcalf and even Lockett, I think they still need to draft a receiver.
Agreed.
At some point in the draft. I don't think first round, because I don't feel like this is a deep first round receiving class. But they do need another option at receiver as a wide receiver 3 if they move on from Lockett, or somebody as a wide receiver 3 in waiting. Jake Bobo, I think, can be used a little more, but in very isolated situations, like back shoulder phase, jump balls, maybe just chain moving plays, 5-10 yards. We know that he's got limitations to his game, but he can block. He's got other value that I'm fine with him being a wide receiver 4. Derek Young, Cody White, those guys are not getting targets. They're not getting playing time. So I feel like they need to think a little more ahead as far as the receiving situation. So I think I'm trying to remember if Westover from Colorado is at the Shrine Bowl or the Senior Bowl. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, Restrepo, Westover, if he's an option, if he's at the Senior Bowl. And also running back's going to be fascinating, because I know we don't want him to draft one early, but this is a deep, deep running back class.
Yeah, Jim Nagy said today that he thinks it's like 30 guys deep of like potential starting caliber NFL running backs, which is an insane number. I think it'll be interesting to see if Seattle does take one, because I think they could take one potentially, to fill out maybe for George Lonnie and prepare for the inevitable departure of K9 or Charbonnet in the next year or two. 2 guys for me that I'm looking at. One of them is a receiver. That's Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. I'm really interested in him as a receiver, and I think he's going to potentially skyrocket up boards. And then the other guy, it's a quarterback. I'm really interested to see what Jalen Milroe does, to see if he can at all help his stock, especially on the passing side of it. Jim Nagy was talking about today, saying how when Jalen Hurts showed up at Senior Bowl, he was graded as a 4th or 5th round player. He goes, Milroe's a little bit higher than that, but he goes, he can help himself a lot if he has a good week here. And if Milroe can come out and show well in the passing drills and in the game and stuff and throughout the week, he may bump his stock up. And he's an intriguing prospect just because of the physical capabilities he has.
Not concerned about his baby hands?
Oh, geez. Yeah, baby hands.
You got to do the hand size talk again. If we don't do it with Goff, we don't do it with Burrow.
I know.
We got to do it with Milroe.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike Green, by the way, on the defensive side of the ball.
Yes, Mike Green's another interesting one.
Because edge rusher is going to be fascinating. Maffe's on the last year of his deal. Hall is going to be in year 3. We don't know if Nwosu is a lock to stay. And then we're going to cut Draymond. So they might need another edge rusher more than we might think. And I feel like they needed another type of edge rusher to win at the line of scrimmage. And not just, they're so reliant on speed and turning the corner compared to just overpowering dudes. I think Hall is better at that than Maffe, but still, to me, you can never have enough options on the line of scrimmage on either side of the ball.
Yeah, a couple more Q&As here, Bryce.
Yeah, I'm just looking through here. Here we go. Here's a good one. From AZ Hawker. If you listen to Saints fans, they are bummed to be losing Kubiak. His use of tight ends and fullbacks in the run and pass game are exactly what McDonald seems to want to inject into the Hawks offense. Yeah, when I saw that the hire occurred, I kind of checked out, some of the Saints stuff. They weren't exactly thrilled. They actually liked what Kubiak was doing last year. They viewed the same kind of thing we do, that he was really hampered by the injuries and what it restricted him and his capability of doing. So again, I think this is an interesting hire for Seattle and what they're going to be able to do. And the other thing that's interesting is because this offense is like half the league runs it in some variation, whether it's the McVay tree or the Shanahan tree, the thing you won't necessarily have to worry about as much if you bring in free agents is teaching them the functions of this offense at its core, because so many guys will have played in it in some variety. Now, yes, you're going to have to, dialogue's going to be different in terminology, but it might allow guys to pick it up and play faster than bringing in something like they did last year, which Nobody had seen Grubb's style of offense before, and it took a while to learn some of it. This might allow guys that we bring in to hit the ground running faster.
Yeah. And I think about the use of tight ends and fullbacks. Well, when you consider Mike Macdonald's background, we know that he was at Michigan for that 1 year, but if we look more at the Ravens side and the offensive coordinators he was with, Greg Roman, and we know this very well from his time in San Francisco, loves to use multiple tight ends. San Francisco had Bruce Miller at fullback. They used Vernon Davis when he was there, and also had Delaney Walker. And then with the Ravens, before he got fired, he had Mark Andrews, he had Peyton Hurst briefly. I think likely was a rookie when Roman got fired, but whatever the case, Patrick Ricard, of course, is a staple of Baltimore's offense. Now he's a free agent too, I think, Ricard, but 300-pound fullback aside, the concept is the same, where you're going to see more heavy stuff. And that's a way to be physical. If you can run 12 and 13 and 21 personnel effectively, even 22 personnel, you can be more effective as a physical team, finding the players you want to run those, run out of those personnels. I feel like that's Macdonald's idea based on his experiences in Baltimore, and even the 1 year at Michigan. That is more of his vision, and that they settled for Grubb, and we ended up getting the result that we got. So Kubiak, again, more closely going to align with what Macdonald has experienced in his time between the 1 year at Michigan and his several seasons in Baltimore, of which I think Kubiak, Gary, was on the coaching staff the year that Macdonald was in his first year with the Ravens. In fact, let's see, he was a coaching intern in 2014, and then he was a defensive assistant in 2015 and 2017. Where Gary Kubiak was the Ravens offensive coordinator in 2014, and then he took the Broncos job. So there you go. That in his first year with Baltimore, it was Kubiak's only year with the Ravens. So just something to keep in mind there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And Dan here with a super sticker. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
hope you're having better success through your Wi-Fi down in Mobile, considering that Hilton Hotels lied to you and said that you'd have an Ethernet, but they didn't actually provide you for one in the hotel room. So hopefully things get better for you down there. And we'll be doing our Pick Is In show on Wednesday, our all draft show, me and Dan's. The Pick Is In. Go follow the channel. We'll be doing a live kind of Senior Bowl update from all of Dan's stuff down there. So that'll be a good one to check into. Here's one from Sully V. Would the Hawks need another tight end? Seems like Fant won't be back, and AJ Barner is doing well. I think it's 100%. You alluded to it earlier, Mookie. I think Juwan Johnson's a real option for Kubiak to bring with him from New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, he was a receiver initially. He was a receiver at Oregon too, I believe. So he's got Pacific Northwest ties. Then again, so did Farrell Brown, and that worked out very, very poorly. But Juwan Johnson is strictly a tight end. He's getting better with his blocking, and he would be familiar with Kubiak's team. But I just like what he provides as a pass catcher. And he is quite athletic too. So if you have Johnson and Barner as your two main tight ends, probably going to be cheaper. And I think they're going to see quite a number of targets. And Johnson provides more, I think, route running abilities and yards after catch than Barner. So it could still lead to Barner being the primary inline guy, and you could split Johnson out wide. But I'll have to see more about New Orleans' offense before I make any grand declarations. And what did Dan say? Yeah, tight end is a big need. I'd say so. Not break the bank, big need, by the way, but it is a big need for this offense.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to take one more here? One or two more?
Mike, we'll do a couple more. Mike comes in here. My son thinks we need to get the QB Willis from the other team. I'm guessing he assumes Green Bay and Malik Willis.
No.
I will say this. Just talking about quarterbacks in general on Seattle's roster, because I've seen a lot of the comments about Geno and Howell and so on. I think there is a stronger situation of Jaren Hall being our number 2 next year. Even if we draft, we could carry 3. And Howell being completely off the roster, because I think Mike Macdonald likes Jaren Hall a lot. He's brought him up numerous times throughout the year where he could have, brought up Sam or whatever. I think there's a point Jaren Hall could really be pushing Sam Howell for that number 2 spot, depending on if we take a quarterback in the draft.
Yeah, it's possible because Hall does have starting experience. However, not well it went, but it's still a thing. And he was a interesting developmental project in the fourth or fifth round, whichever round the Vikings took him. So what was the thing? Malik Willis. He'll
Yeah.
just he's just going to stay as the backup to Jordan Love.
Yeah.
If
a good
only
gig.
it was so easy to just randomly acquire backup quarterbacks. The reason why Sam Howell got dealt is because the Commanders had a new coaching staff that saw no reason to make Sam Howell their franchise quarterback with the number 2 overall pick. So
Pretty good move, eh?
yeah, I'd say it was a pretty good move. And then if anybody's saying Joe Milton is going to be like available for trade, sorry, but Jacoby Brissett's the one who's going to be out of New England, and Joe Milton is going to be Drake May's backup. Hendon Hooker noticeably was a QB3 to a semi-retired Teddy Bridgewater. So
Right.
I think that Hooker's probably still going to stay as Goff's backup. But yeah, it's not like there is this lavish market for teams just eager to dump their backup quarterbacks for a draft pick. They want their backup to be respectable, man. They don't.
Well, and you see what happened in Green Bay, right? Willis came in and kept him afloat. When Love got hurt early, people were like, "Oh, there goes Green Bay season." Obviously, you thought that injury was maybe going to be worse than it was, but he came in and won some football games and kept Green Bay in it. And then Love comes back, and obviously they had a good season. So yeah, it's more important than ever to have a good backup these days, right? So yeah,
Well,
I don't see that happen.
Or a bridge. Sam Darnold, of course, maybe he was always going to be the starter. It would have been interesting to see if he would have eventually backed up McCarthy. But
Right.
I guess that's the one elephant in the room we didn't address is the possibility that Seattle would look at Darnold. In fact, don't forget, Kubiak and Darnold were on the same staff and same team in 2023. Darnold was Purdy's backup. So if Seattle is so minded to give Darnold a shot, and that obviously means moving on from Geno, then there is that angle too. But I think there is a chance the Vikings would franchise tag Darnold and give him his money, but just for that one season, like the ultimate 1-year prove-it deal upon the prove-it deal he already got.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. Dan brings up a guy I forgot to mention that I've done a lot of research on is Taylor Elgersma from Laurier University in Canada. He's a quarterback that went down to Senior Bowl. He's 6'6", 215, but that kid can sling the ball. And Jim Nagy's already mentioned how he has a lot of NFL quarterback traits. Very interesting to see how he does this weekend down there. Dan and me are probably going to do a little bit of a segment on adjusting for our quarterback from the Canadian game to the American game and the changes that happen. So it'll be an interesting show to talk about Taylor, but he's going to be an interesting prospect down there just due to his size and physical ability. So,
all right, let's take one more here.
Well, I'll do this one first. Mookie, Dan wants you on his show. He says it's been too long and you guys need to fix that. So
there you go.
Give you that one out there. And let's see. I'm looking
pick
in
your
here.
best one. Pick your best one.
Oh, here's a good one from Casey. Do you take Warner if he somehow makes it to 18?
Man, I like you. Jeez, man, that would be like, I would. I mean, Mookie, what's your take? Because a lot of people say, oh, O-line, but like, I think free agency is going to play a bigger role until you get to, you know what I mean? Like if we go out and make a significant signing at the guard position, then you have some developmental guys already. Then would you take Warren at 18?
Yeah, of course, the tight end thing, as far as taking tight ends in the first round, it's been a mixed bag over the years. But Brock Bowers is bringing tight ends back to life, baby, because of the first round, because Florida was a second round pick. But still, he's too talented and versatile not to think about getting him. I had no issue if Seattle had taken Bowers over Murphy. I think he went like 2 picks before Murphy did. I mean, that to me, if you get a tight end who can block, who can be an inline guy, who can be someone who can line up at all positions at receiver, he can do so many different things. Hell, he can be quarterback. He can be a trick play quarterback if you want him to, an auxiliary option. I have no issue if they take Tyler Warren.
It'd be exciting.
Yes, and also you bring up a good point. Free agency, as far as redoing this offensive line, you always got to be wary of having inexperience on the offensive line because your veterans are going to be Cross and Lucas, no doubt. So those guys are still on their rookie deals.
Yeah.
You don't know who's going to be your right guard. It could be Lamea. It could be Bradford. It could be Haynes. Haynes is a big question mark, whether he's even going to be a guard or he's maybe moving to center. We're assuming Oluwatimi's going to be the center, but that's not a lock. And then a left guard, you're definitely going to need to replace Tomlinson. So you got to be wary of having a lot of inexperience on the interior part of the offensive line. But you also don't want to swing the other way and take a faded vet like Tomlinson, who is healthy enough to play every snap, but not good enough to be someone worth retaining. So
I'm thinking Trey Smith this year. Hey, how does that sound? Let's go get him. But no, in all being realistic, get somewhere around, maybe not Trey, but not Lakin, right? I think we all know that just can't happen. But is John going to just do that again? That's the thing. Does he think he can get another bargain basement? That's a whole nother conversation of like getting in John Schneider's head and how he's been doing things. Because that could actually happen, right? So, that's what's going to be interesting next couple months here.
Yeah, like Bredesen from Tampa Bay is a free agent, I think, and he wasn't much of anything with the Giants from what I remember, but he was good in Tampa Bay. Now, how much of that was also getting to play alongside Wirfs and a really good offensive line remains to be seen. But he could be an option if Tampa Bay doesn't re-sign him. Drew Dahlman from Atlanta was a pretty good center. I have some issues with his snapping, but he's not Connor Williams bad in terms of just flailing every shotgun snap miles over people's heads. But Dahlman would provide a lot of run blocking help. And we see that Atlanta's offense has got some similar concepts to what Kubiak likes to run. So mid-level free agent signings for offensive linemen, I think is totally fine. I don't expect them to be in the Trey Smith sweepstakes.
No, I don't think so either.
And also there is every bit the chance that Kansas City, the new empire people dislike, the empire that will always strike back, that they could just keep Trey Smith. So
I love that reference.
No question.
Phenomenal. So closing thoughts, guys.
Bryce. Yeah, go for it, Bryce. Closing thoughts.
For me, we played around with the cap simulator for over the cap. We saw how we could make some moves for Seattle to get some instant cap relief. I'll get better at using it, honestly, and get some more accurate contract projections for DK and Geno and what those could look like. But overall, you can see the Seahawks have some levers they can pull to make space for themselves. I think they'll be active, but like Mookie says, I don't think they'll be in the top end sweepstakes. When it comes to Klint Kubiak, I'm excited, guys. I think, we might have a sustainable offense this year that is much better at keeping us in games, allowing this defense to do its thing without having to play hero ball on the back end for us and get us out of holes. And we'll see what comes of Geno. The conversation with Geno is now, I think, the next big topic that's going to kind of take over this offseason here is what do they do with Geno Smith?
Right.
So it's something we're going to be kind of watching closely over the next month and a bit here.
I'll say this really quick. I'm going to let Mookie say something. But, yeah, that's the beautiful thing about the offseason, right? Like, we're just finish the OC, on to the next topic, man. There's just so many things to talk about. It's going to be awesome, hanging out with Mookie, every second week talking about, there's going to be just tons of stuff to talk about. The Geno stuff, I think it's just going to get more and more interesting, especially as that March deadline comes up. But, we'll pop this one real quick and then Mookie just let you say your final stuff. A great show, guys. Dear Mr. Kubiak, I'm really hoping we've seen the last of Geno or whoever the QB is in shotgun on third and fourth and short. Makes me throw things at the TV, and I can't afford to keep buying new TVs. Dave S., we really appreciate the super chat, man. That's awesome. Mookie, you want to comment on this here?
Yeah, TVs are a lot cheaper than they used to be 20, 30 years ago when you factor in inflation. We're not talking about buying eggs here. Anyway, the deal with Geno and shotgun third or fourth one, whoever the quarterback is, if you have the Eagles offensive line, you can run any formation.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, my thoughts are offseason is normally peak optimism season for most teams. For some reason, I don't think the Dallas Cowboys fit that category after the Schottenheimer hiring. So good luck, Shotty.
Especially with the fan base, right?
Yeah. But that aside, I'm still eager to see what happens with the quarterback situation. I'm just hoping that they have a more stable base with their offense. And make no mistake about it. I know the cliches defense wins championships, and we want this defense to be even better than it was last year, but you need offense. You absolutely need offense. You have no shot to win anything or make any deep playoff run if you have anything below an above average offense. So if the Seahawks can be at least above average in that, I will take the 7 to 12 range. That's going to give them a fighting chance to contend. And that's something that they haven't had for the last couple of seasons. So I'm just hoping for more down-to-down consistency, not having all these pre-snap penalties and all these things. I'm just hoping for fewer growing pains learning a new offense with Kubiak than they had to do with Grubb. So again, just knock on wood, and we know that there are going to be other moves to be made, not just within Seattle, but around the league. So we're talking about free agents and all that. There are going to be guys who are going to be cap casualties all around the league where we don't have to worry about losing out on comp picks or anything, but there could be bargains to be had in other areas that Schneider can utilize effectively. So it's going to be a fun offseason, I hope, and reasons to hope that Seattle can at least get back into that playoff level of football that has just been lacking.
So, guys, I just want to give Mike here a quick shout out. He was the first time listener tonight,
Sure.
but I really like the show, guys. Keep up the great work. High five. I'll try and pop in when I'm able, going through chemo. Mike, we wish you all the best, man. Really appreciate you coming on the show. I've seen you over on the Hawk Blocker comments before with Brian Nimhauser. Really appreciate you jumping on over here, man, and giving this channel a view, and hopefully you enjoyed the content tonight, as well did everybody else. I hope you guys enjoyed it. But for us, I think that's it tonight, guys.
That's it. A great show, Mookie. Appreciate it once again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you got coming up? What do you got coming up on field goals here?
Well, it's Monday night, and then Tuesday morning there will be an analysis article from our own Alexandre Castro, Brazil's finest, to take a closer deep dive into Klint Kubiak's offense and the concepts he likes. So there'll be some all-22 stuff there. He also has some Senior Bowl players to watch. In fact, the defensive article was already out Monday. The offensive players will be out on Tuesday. We even had some Shrine Bowl stuff. So we're going to be knee-deep and even deeper than that as far as looking at college prospects over the next couple of months in ways that we have not been over at Field Goals for a long time. So stick around for all of that. It's not just going to be about looking at free agents and who to re-sign and who to trade and whatnot. We're going to be looking at prospects and players that the Seahawks could be interested in the weeks and months to come.
Awesome, Mookie. And guys, if you haven't already, subscribe, like the channel, helps us out, helps us bring on guests and create spin-off shows like this with Mookie Alexander from Field Goals. And as well, jump on over to the Pick Is In podcast, my side project with Dan Viens. We're going to be talking all things Senior Bowl this week on the draft, doing some live shows starting on Wednesday. So make sure you guys hop over there as well and give that channel a like and subscribe. Awesome. Have a good night, guys.
Awesome stuff. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.